Have you ever heard about filler movements? Yeah, filler movements. We often hear about filler words, but filler movements are things that we do with our bodies throughout the presentation that we don't even realize. So, some people, they're standing up and they go back and forth in the presentation and they present it the whole time. I've seen people almost doing jazz squares. The only thing I was waiting for them to do after was like, because they were pretty much dancing at that point. Some people are just fidgeting with their fingers. Some people crack it, see? Some people put their hands in their pockets. The point is, everyone has at least one filler movement. What you have to do is to try and find your filler movements, and you can do that by recording yourself giving the presentation once, or better, to have a friend specifically look for that in one of your presentations and tell you like, hey, look, by the way, this is what you did. That's one way, because when you're presenting, that's when you're nervous. When you're practicing, perhaps you're not as nervous. All of those filler movements just basically show that you're nervous. Another example is when someone is sitting down. You can notice that in class. When they're not speaking, and they're just still. They're sitting still. Now, when they start speaking, if their chair can rotate, they start rotating as they say. And then as soon as they stop rotating. Well, that just shows that they're nervous. That's precisely the point. All of those movements just show your nervousness. So one way to try to overcome that is by simply and purposefully planting your feet on the ground. And when you move with intention. Now, look at what moving with intention looks and what it does not look like. Often people ask, what do I do with my hands? Do I put them in my pocket? Do I hold them? What do you do, right? Look, if you're holding a clicker, you could perhaps do this as you're speaking. Hand gestures, you see how it's all close by, you're not just dropping it, it kind of feels weird. If you can keep your hands from going too crazy, then you're probably doing good, okay? And again, when you're presenting, when you're speaking, do whatever you want. When you're speaking to a friend, go for it, get crazy with all sorts of hand motions. But when you're presenting, it's something that you've prepared. You're ready for it. So even the motions of your hands should be prepared in advance. There are a couple of motions and patterns of hand motions that you probably don't know. Here's one. When you go north, south, so up, down, you're sort of showing power. You're being assertive. So when you're making a point, you see? Now, when you kind of want to go like, yeah, maybe you see how this, okay, perhaps I'm open to discussion. You see? Or maybe this is defensive. It's like, you see how the hand movements make a huge difference? And when you're going like this, perhaps the next thing you do is, I don't know. So when you're making a point, make sure that your hand motions are in accordance to whatever you're trying to show. Another thing is pointing at things or people. If you point at someone like this, that's kind of like you, right? But if you're talking about a classmate, hey, we're talking about John over here. You see my hand? This is different than this, than turning your palm upwards makes a difference here. When you're pointing down, that person. Hey, keep that in mind as well. And finally, make sure your hands add to the story. If you're getting excited, use your hands. Use your body. If the situation is something more quiet, more serious, then you're calm. You see how that changes the environment? Why would you not use that? So make sure that you use all the tools that you have and your hands are part of it. You may have forgotten this, but your voice plays a huge role in how people perceive your presentation. Look, this is a video without the visuals. You can still hear me. You can still follow whatever I'm saying. It still makes sense to you. However, look at this. You see? The audio plays a huge part. you can probably remember that one class in which the professor would always talk in the same note and you would not have any clue of what to do because the professor would only talk like this and the class was completely and utterly boring. So why are you doing that? If you used to complain about how that presentation was monotone and it was boring, why do you do the same thing? Now, if you hadn't realized that you were doing that, okay, I'll take it. But if you had, come on, make sure that your voice goes up and down as your presentation goes as well. You see, 2 seconds ago, I was going completely monotone. But now, you gotta make sure that you keep the person engaged. Look, this is a completely different vibe. And that's what you gotta make sure. Sometimes speeding up or going slow. Talking really fast and talking a lot of words at the same time, but sometimes just pausing. And finally, if you're at a moment in which your presentation is sad, or dark, or whatever, or happy, convey that. Use your voice to convey that, and you need to practice. I know the theater people are probably loving this part. Make sure that when you're moving and when you're using your hands, you're using the full thing. If you're closing your fist to show that someone is rigid or whatever, you want to make sure that you do it all the way to the fingertips, right? Because if you soften it, it's something else, it's something different. But if you see, it gives a whole completely different energy. Now, the last thing that's missing is your face. Your eyes, your eyebrows, your face muscles. Jim Carrey is well known for having tons of different facial expressions, so just go and look at that. But I also want to give you an example. I don't have the rights to show here, but I can talk about it. You can probably go on YouTube and look for Hamilton, You'll Be Back. It's a Broadway performance. The actor, and you're going to see, the performer, moves very, very little. However, you can see in his eyes, in his eyebrows, in his mouth, the facial expressions. He doesn't need to move. And if you can incorporate that to your presentations, it adds even more. So, no more giving the presentation always looking like this, because that's the only way you can possibly look in a presentation. Because you have to be serious and you cannot make jokes. No more of that. Make your presentation engaging. Tell a story.